I would love to use my crutches on Jake Paul, that's for sure, with his big mouth. The guy, I respect him. He knows how to market his product. But the craziness that's going on, and before we get into basketball, I just want to end this and set this thing straight. I challenged Jake Paul on the Sports Loudmouths 2 weeks ago. Now, I haven't heard anything. He obviously doesn't think I'm any bit of a big name to challenge somebody like him. I am not 100%. I am injured. It's going to take a little while to heal up. But I would love to teach that kid a little bit of a lesson. I don't care how old he is, 24, 25. I'm a 39-year-old man who has boxed. And what he is doing to boxing. Everybody says, look what he's doing for boxing. What is he doing for boxing? Making boxing out to be a cartoon. That's what he is. He's a cartoon character. You might as well call him the Roadrunner. What is going on with combat sports? With Dana White, and I think the Madison Square Garden UFC, I think it's 268 card, is fantastic. Usman versus Covington. It's going to be a great card. You have a couple of championships on the line. You have Frankie Edgar on the card. We have a couple of Long Islanders on the card. But what's going on with Jake Paul and what's going on with mixed martial arts, it's like Dana White versus Jake Paul. And Dana White, as good as Dana White is as a marketer for what he's done for the UFC over the last 30 years, 20 years, and then obviously Jake Paul and what he's done in the last 2.5, 3 years as a boxer, I just think what's going on in professional sports now? You have guys that have not boxed for more than 3 years challenging athletes, challenging movie stars, musicians. It's become an absolute mockery. You have this weekend, you have Evander Holyfield coming out of retirement. What is he, 80-something years old? I mean, seriously. And people are buying and paying for that. To me, it's completely changing what marketing is and what the world is. Does it benefit us? It doesn't. It benefits guys like, obviously, guys like Jake Paul. It benefits guys like Dana White with what he's doing with Conor McGregor and the different fighters that he has over there, Nate Diaz. But I think that when you look at professional sports and where sports is going, you want to see growth in all the sports. And the change of rules and the change of stupidity that's going on with a Disney Channel character, okay, Mr. Tweety Bird, all right, dancing around with his tattoos all over his head, his long-ass blonde hair, and his posting up on social media. It's absolutely incredibly stupid why people are actually paying to watch this. This guy made $30 million on that Woodley fight. Woodley, who's a wrestler. Everybody says, oh, he was a champion, one of the greatest welterweights in UFC history. He is a wrestler. He retires. He comes out of retirement. He's another Conor McGregor. And now he's going to fight this Fury kid who, by the way, hasn't fought more than 4 rounds in any of his professional boxing debut. I don't care who his cousin, brother, mother, father, sister, whatever family he comes from. We all know where his background lies. He is not a great boxer. I want to see if Jake Paul wants to prove to me that he could fight me or fight somebody that actually could fight. All right? It's embarrassing.
Maybe all the Evander Holyfield pay-per-view money could go into surgery to get him another ear.
I have no idea. Well, maybe Mike Tyson will buy it for him. Maybe he'll spit it out on him. I have no idea. But it's incredibly ridiculous what's going on in boxing and mixed martial arts. And both guys in boxing and Jake Paul and then Dana White. And to me, it's a complete utter joke. And I think that we need to start moving where the sports are growing, not falling apart. And that's where it's coming. So anyways, that's my spiel on that. I do want to get into this Ben Simmons thing and the NBA. I don't know what is going on with Ben Simmons, okay? Every week it's somebody else. It went from Golden State to Cleveland to Toronto to Houston, Minnesota, Sacramento. Next thing you know, we're going to go through all 30-some-odd teams. Maybe we should just spin the wheel and make the deal. Because the 76ers, making Ben Simmons out to be Michael Jordan-esque or even a Kevin Durant-esque, it's ridiculous. This man, and Jeff says it right, this man has hit, 3 3-pointers?
He's 5 for 34 in his
5
career.
for 34 as an NBA player. 5 for 34. Now, he's a fantastic player, 3-time All-Star. We know what he's strong at. He's a great defensive player, one of the best in the league. He's got tremendous length. He can play multiple positions. He's fantastic. There's no argument to that. Before I get into my arguments of Ben Simmons, what are your thoughts to this whole Ben Simmons saga? Because I'm lost. We're hearing that Toronto is the lead team to get him now. Now, for what, and what are they willing to give? And is this going to make the 76ers that much better, where they were a contending team last year, and now this year, losing Ben Simmons, they're falling right out of contention. I don't know where they think they're going to be this year, even with a healthy Joel Embiid.
Yeah, they're going to have to hope to get some other quality player back into the trade for them to quote-unquote stay in contention. Now, we know that the Sixers lack depth, but the Sixers front office, whether it was Daryl Morey, whether it was the previous regime with Sam Hinkie and Elton Brand and all those guys running, they've gone to many different drastic extremes. And that's the thing that kind of worries me with this kind of thing with the Ben Simmons trade, because they've been asking for 3 first-round picks. They're asking for all these top players, and they're not getting them right now. Where is the value going to fall? Are they going to have to resort to trading for veterans? Are they going to have to resort to taking on another bad contract just to get good players? Like, that's where the biggest concerns are now. And now a lot of the teams that are now favored outside of Toronto, who we know can be good. They had a bad year last year, but we know they can be good. They were number 2 seed in the East the year before. Obviously, they won the NBA Finals and they had Kawhi Leonard. So we know they can be good. But outside of that, it's a lot of fringe teams. The Kings, on the cusp maybe, but low-end playoff team if they're a playoff team. Minnesota rebuilding. Houston rebuilding. They're stuck now resorting to those teams where they're not going to get the value that they want draft pick-wise. And that's a bad sign. So they're going to have to hope maybe they could get another superstar in that deal, maybe a third team involved in the deal, maybe another team to take on a bad contract in order to make it work. And the Sixers front office, we know they haven't been good, so I don't trust them to get it done.
I don't trust anything with the Sixers. And to me, when I look at the Sixers and where the Sixers are going as an organization and a team, they're going to fall apart. Doc Rivers bringing them in, I don't think he was the right fit for the organization. Ben Simmons became a better defensive player, but how much better is he?
Right.
You would think that he was going to help him transition as a shooter. He's become even worse as a shooter. I don't know where this organization is going. Eventually, we're going to hear Joel Embiid's name come up in conversations to trade. This is an organization that never keeps their players, never stays on top. And by the way, they've been a pretty good team for the last couple of years. Why would you get rid of something that has been good for the last 5 years? It doesn't make sense. Ben Simmons didn't look good last year in the playoffs, but he never looks good as a shooter. So what do you think you're going to get for him? Is he worth what you think that you're going to try to grab and steal from people? I don't think he's worth that. I think he's worth maybe 1 first-round draft pick and a player. To think that you're going to get 3 first-round draft picks, 2 of them being lottery picks, and then a possible player that is a good player, I think you're out of your damn mind. It's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and it's resorted to the fact where they might barely get 2 if it's the right team, maybe Toronto, but they're not going to get any more than that. And if they're going to get that, they're not going to get any player of quality that they were thinking initially. We were thinking, okay, the Sixers are involved with the Blazers. Maybe they can get C.J. McCollum back. Maybe the Sixers, if they get another third team involved, maybe they're the team that lands Damian Lillard, because they were, a month ago, they were one of the favorites to get Damian Lillard along with the Knicks. Now it's fallen so far where they're going to have to hope to get a top young player from one of these other teams, but I don't know why a Minnesota or a Houston or any teams like that are going to want to trade a top 3 draft pick that they just drafted, and obviously the Timberwolves with a lot of those guys. So are they going to make that thing work? Maybe the Timberwolves have to trade Karl Anthony Towns. Maybe that's where the point they're stuck at right now.
which I think is going to happen.
Which I think is going to happen too. But if you're the Sixers, maybe you'll luck out in that regard. But still, like, that's not
They're not getting Karl Anthony Towns.
I don't think they are at this point either. I'm just saying, like,
Karl Anthony Towns is one of the best centers in the league.
Minnesota might fall too. They're not a good front office either. So
Kevin Garnett is part of that ownership. I don't see it happening.
I don't either. I'm just saying the Timberwolves do weird things too. I wouldn't rule it out. But still, the Sixers have resorted to the point where it's going to be very hard to get anything of quality back unless you get a third team involved. Maybe the best player they can get back is Pascal Siakam from the Raptors. That's maybe the point they're on right now. And Siakam's rising. He's a nice player, but again, you should want a player that maybe has significantly more upside than Ben Simmons, and I don't think Siakam is that much of an upgrade.
I don't know where they're going with this. As far as the Knicks are concerned, there were stories coming out that the New York Knicks this offseason, after adding Kemba Walker and all the different players that they added in free agency, that the Knicks were going to try to make a huge move where they can bring in a wing player that can actually win the job and actually be consistent for the New York Knicks. And looking this offseason, I really expected the New York Knicks to make more of a big bang type of thing. And this offseason's been, for the money that the Knicks had, and they led the league in money that they could have spent in the offseason, did they add enough where they can contend with, like, the Chicago Bulls, who added the opposition of Alonzo Ball or DeRozan and the players that they added? They made a couple of trades, too, to really solidify that starting lineup. And if you look at right now the Chicago Bulls and how they built their team, go to the Chicago Bulls starting lineup. If the season were to start right now, what would be their starting lineup?
So it would be Alonzo, I would imagine, is the 1. Mm-hmm. You got Zach LaVine, either 2 2 or 3, and then DeRozan in the other spot. As of right now, Lauri Markkanen is in there, and maybe the kid they drafted 4th overall, Patrick
Didn't
Williams.
they get somebody from Orlando? Didn't they get him?
Oh, Vucevic. Yeah, you're right.
Vucevic.
I forgot about that. Yeah, he's the 5 then.
So if you look at the money that the Knicks had in the offseason to spend, if you try to compare the Chicago Bulls, and by the way, they have a great coach in Donovan, too, a Long Island native. Do you think that the Knicks have enough in a 7-game series to beat the Chicago Bulls?
I think they have better depth right now than the Bulls. The question is, again, Billy Donovan, Tom Thibodeau, that's going to be a chess match when it comes to coaching because Donovan's had his success over the years as well. But the question is, are the Bulls' stars are going to be capable enough?
They have a better starting lineup than the Knicks, though.
They probably do. I love Vucevic. I think he's always been one of the most
underrated
centers in the league. DeMar DeRozan's kind of up and down. He's a bad playoff player. He's not a great three-point shooter, but he's a good defender. Lonzo Ball, he improved a little bit last year, but I mean, what is he? Zach LaVine, I think, is the best player of the bunch, assuming the Knicks don't get anyone else either, because the Knicks could obviously still make a big trade. But I think Zach LaVine knew in the playoffs, too, kind of like Julius Randle. Will that be a hindrance on him? So that'll be an interesting series. Tom Thibodeau's Bulls have kind of been dismantled, so it's not really like, all right, I know the Bulls because I used to coach there. It's kind of a new identity.
Completely new identity.
So I don't know if that'll factor in as much, but probably with the playoff experience, I'd probably give the slight edge to the Knicks right now, but it definitely will be close.
By the way, Zach LaVine is the best player out of all the bunch.
I agree.
Julius Randle had a sensational year. Zach LaVine has been a better player. He really has. I worry about the Knicks this year because the money that they had to spend, and everybody was talking about like adding a new star. Now, the contracts vary for the Knicks, and going into next year's offseason, maybe they can maneuver contracts because the contracts, they didn't really extend these contracts where they're complete ridiculous, but they have a lot of pieces that they can trade in the middle of the season at the trade deadline. But it scares me the way the Knicks position themselves. A lot of Knicks fans thought it was Damian Lillard, where they were going to add Damian Lillard. A lot of people thought that they had the opportunity to possibly make a move for another big superstar, and they didn't do anything. They got Kemba Walker on a steal. Mm-hmm. If Kemba Walker doesn't produce this year, he could be the steal of the offseason. But if Kemba Walker doesn't produce, the Knicks could be looking like the laughingstock of the NBA again.
Well, don't worry. At least they didn't pay Joakim Noah $150 million. They didn't do anything that egregious.
Well, not yet, but we'll see what happens. But as far as the Nets in the offseason, everybody's comparing the Lakers to the Nets. This is going to go down to the wire, and we're going to see the Nets and the Lakers in the NBA championship. I think the Lakers are a more stacked team. They have more depth. I think adding Dwight Howard in the offseason and Rajon Rondo, I think they're more of a defensive-minded team to the Nets, adding the players that they added, which obviously bringing players out of retirement and players that are just old. I mean, seriously. Why do people think that the Nets are the team to beat this year?
They think it maybe because of shooting, but again, playoff identities, the Lakers definitely have the advantage. We know Rondo's very good in the playoffs. Dwight Howard has been very good in the playoffs outside of his stint with the Rockets. Obviously, LeBron has all kinds of playoff records. I know Kevin Durant's been great in the playoffs, too, for the Nets, but that's really the only one that you could say, all right, this guy is great in the playoffs. James Harden, we know how bad he is in the playoffs. Kyrie Irving's been good, not great, I would say, in the playoffs. Obviously a key part for their championship, but still up and down as a whole. With the Celtics, he barely played. With the Cavaliers, in the first couple of years, he was in and out with injuries. So what kind of thing is he going to look at? The Nets' depth, LaMarcus Aldridge, up and down in the playoffs. Blake Griffin finally played well in the playoffs, but still has had some bad years, too, when it comes to with the Clippers and Lob City. When Chris Paul was very good and DeAndre Jordan was pretty good, he had some bad games too. So could you expect with that? So the Lakers, I think, definitely have the advantage when it comes to that.
Why does everybody think the Nets do? It's ridiculous.
I know, it's very strange. The Lakers have a lot of just good playoff guys. Yeah, they have their streakiness too with what we see with Melo, but Melo's not going to play all the time. Russell Westbrook, same kind of thing.
Who has the two best guys?
LeBron and Durant are the two best guys, but Anthony Davis, I think, is third after that.
Yeah, and I think Anthony Davis is right there with Kevin Durant. If Anthony Davis is 100% healthy, he's going to give you 28 and 10 and 5. Durant's great, and I'm not saying Anthony Davis is better than Kevin Durant, but he's right there on the cusp. You're talking about Anthony Davis, a top 5 player. He is a top 5 player when he's 100% healthy. Having still LeBron James, and by the way, they still have Russell Westbrook. We forget about him, who's a triple-double machine. Carmelo Anthony can give you 15 points. I mean, this team is stacked. They're scary stack. This is probably the oldest team we've ever seen, but also when you look at the All-Stars and Hall of Famers, I don't think we're going to see a team that has more All-Stars and more Hall of Famers on a team.
Combined accomplishments.
It's crazy. It really is.
Yeah. The biggest problem, I think, with the Nets, just because of the way they're set up, is outside of Kevin Durant and obviously some of the big men they just brought in, they're just a little bit of a smaller team against a Lakers team that has so much size, with Dwight Howard, with Anthony Davis, who is 7 feet tall. LeBron James can defend any position. And that's the biggest problem with the Nets, where Kyrie Irving, James Harden, James Harden's kind of tall for his position, but still doesn't really play big a lot of the time. Kyrie Irving, a smaller point guard, against Russell Westbrook, who's 6'5" or something like that, and he's really strong, very physical.